Zera had always been prepared for war. As a warrior from a fierce alien race, she had seen battles and bloodshed all her life. She was taught to fight, to survive, and most importantly, to never show weakness. But nothing had prepared her for this. The raid had gone wrong. What was supposed to be a swift attack on a human outpost turned into a disaster. Zera's squad had been ambushed. Humans were more dangerous than she had imagined. They were everywhere, moving quickly and silently, as if they knew exactly what her team would do. It wasn't long before Zera found herself surrounded. She fought with everything she had, but even she knew when the odds were too great. Her enemies were too many. Her wounds began to slow her down, and before she could think of a way to escape, she was captured. Zera had been taken aboard a human ship, far from the battlefield she knew. She lay in a small, cold cell, her hands bound to a metal chair. Her body ached, and her mind raced with fear. She had heard the stories of humans being cruel, of them torturing their enemies until they broke. The rumors were enough to make her stomach twist with dread. She had been prepared for torture. It was what she expected. She was an enemy, after all, a warrior. Her heart pounded as she waited for the inevitable. The cold walls of the cell felt even colder now. She could hear voices outside, muffled, but unmistakable. The humans were talking, planning, perhaps deciding what to do with her. Zera had no illusions about her situation. She knew they would break her. She would be forced to reveal everything about her people. But when the door opened, it wasn't the terrifying soldiers she had imagined. It was a single human man, dressed in a simple uniform. He stepped inside and closed the door behind him. Zera's eyes narrowed, her muscles tensing as she braced herself for what was to come. But instead of the harsh commands or painful instruments she had expected, he merely looked at her with curiosity. "Are you all right?" he asked, his voice surprisingly soft. Zera didn't answer. She stared at him, trying to make sense of the situation. His eyes were kind, but there was a firmness to his posture that reminded her he was still a soldier. Yet the question he asked made no sense to her. Why would he care if she was all right? He was her enemy, the one who would make her suffer. The man took a step forward and then stopped. He didn't move any closer. "I'm Marcus," he said after a moment, still watching her with gentle eyes. "I'm the one in charge of your care. We're going to keep you safe here." He paused as if weighing his words carefully. "For now, anyway." Zera blinked in confusion. "Safe," she repeated under her breath. Her voice sounded strange to her own ears. She wasn't used to speaking with enemies, especially not so casually. "Yes, safe." Marcus nodded. "I'll make sure you have everything you need while you're here." Zera's head spun. She was certain she heard wrong. This couldn't be real. Why would he say something like that? Her kind had been at war with humans for years. The humans had attacked her homeworld. They had killed her people. So why was this soldier acting like this? She had seen enough of human cruelty to know that their kindness, if it even existed, was rare and usually false. "Why am I here?" she asked, her voice sharp. "What do you want from me?" Marcus tilted his head slightly, as if considering how to answer. "We don't want anything from you. I just want you to be comfortable while you're here. I won't hurt you." Zera's mind raced. He was lying. He had to be. There had to be some trick to it. Humans didn't capture their enemies and then offer comfort. They didn't treat prisoners like they were guests. She remembered the stories from her childhood, how the humans would break their prisoners down, forcing them to betray their people. She had heard that they didn't care for their captives, only for extracting information. But this human wasn't following any of the rules. "Why aren't you torturing me?" Zera asked, her voice quieter now, almost a whisper. She couldn't believe the words as they left her lips, but they were out there now. Marcus's face softened. He seemed genuinely puzzled. "Torture," he repeated slowly. "That's not how we do things. It's not my way." His words only confused Zera more. What kind of human soldier was this? Why was he not like the others? Why was he offering her peace when all she had expected was pain? "I don't believe you," Zira said, shaking her head. She tried to stand, to break free from the chair, but the bindings around her wrists held her firmly in place. Marcus didn't move. "I know you don't, and I don't expect you to," he said, "but I'll give you time. I won't rush you." For a moment, there was silence between them. Zira's thoughts swirled. She was no longer sure what to believe. She had prepared for pain, for suffering. But instead, this human, this soldier, was offering her something different, something she couldn't quite understand. What was this strange feeling that stirred inside her? Was it hope? The gentle human soldier. Zira lay in the small plane room, her eyes fixed on the door. Her mind was full of questions, but she couldn't find answers. The human who had brought her here, Marcus, was unlike any enemy she had ever known. Instead of anger or cruelty, he seemed kind. It confused her, and that confusion gnawed at her. She had expected pain. She had prepared for torture. But Marcus had done none of those things. He had treated her with respect and care, things she thought humans were incapable of. Every time he entered the room, she tensed, ready for the worst. But all he did was speak to her softly, offer her food, and check if she needed anything. Zira couldn't understand it. As the days passed, Marcus didn't change. He brought her meals, sometimes warm, sometimes cold, but always with a friendly smile. He would ask her about her home, her people, but never pushed too hard. Zira had learned early on to keep her emotions hidden, to never show weakness. But there was something in Marcus's gentle voice, something in the way he looked at her, that made it harder to keep her guard up. "Do you like the food?" he asked one day, as he placed a tray of warm meat and vegetables in front of her. Zira didn't answer right away. She wasn't sure how to respond. She had always been taught to distrust humans, but the food smelled good, and her stomach growled. She had never tasted anything like this before. She nodded slowly, still unsure of his intentions. "It's good," she said quietly. "Better than the meals we have back home." Marcus smiled, pleased with her answer. "I'm glad you like it. I wasn't sure what you would want to eat." Zira frowned, trying to understand. She was a prisoner. He was her captor. Yet he was treating her as though she was a guest. It didn't make sense. She had heard the stories of how humans treated their enemies. Brutality, torture, fear. But Marcus didn't fit those stories. He seemed almost too kind. As the days went by, Zira began to notice small things. Marcus always made sure her room was clean. He would bring her fresh water without her asking. Sometimes he even gave her books. Books about human history, about their wars, their victories, their peace. He never seemed to push her to read them, but he would leave them on the small table in the corner of her cell, as if he was offering her knowledge, not pain. One evening, as Marcus was about to leave, Zira spoke up. "Why do you help me?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Her question was simple, but it carried the weight of everything she had been feeling since she arrived. Marcus stopped and turned toward her. There was no surprise in his eyes, no anger, just calmness. "I don't believe in hurting others, Zira," he said softly. "It's not the way I was raised. You're not just an enemy to me. You're a person, just like me." Zira stared at him, unable to respond. She had always been told that humans were ruthless, that they were savages, that they only cared about winning. But Marcus wasn't like that. He spoke of kindness and fairness, words she had never heard a human say before. It made her wonder, was he lying? Was he trying to trick her? But Marcus didn't seem like a liar. His eyes were honest, his face sincere. She couldn't find any signs of deception in him. For the first time, Zira began to question everything she thought she knew about humans. Over the next few days, Zira's doubts grew. She wasn't sure if she was seeing the truth, or if she was simply too weak to fight the kindness Marcus kept showing her. The walls of her cell, which once felt like a cage, seemed to grow smaller, less threatening. The bed was soft, the food warm, and Marcus was always there with a kind word or gesture. One afternoon, Marcus entered the room carrying a small bundle of clothes. He placed them on the bed and turned to her. "These should fit you better," he said. "I thought you might be more comfortable." Zira glanced at the clothes. They were simple, nothing fancy, but they were soft, clean, and much more comfortable than the rough prison jumpsuit she had been wearing. She hesitated, unsure whether to take them. "It's not a trick, Zira," Marcus said, as if reading her mind. "I just want you to be comfortable. I'm not your enemy. Not like you think." Zira didn't know what to say. She had always been taught to fight, to resist, to never trust humans, but Marcus was making it hard for her to hold on to that. He was making her feel human again, not like a prisoner, but like a person who deserved kindness. It scared her more than anything. She nodded slowly, unsure of what to do next. "Thank you," she said quietly, the words strange on her tongue. Marcus smiled, his eyes warm. "You're welcome. And Zira, if you ever need anything at all, you can ask me. I'll listen." That was the moment Zira realized something that shook her to her core. She wasn't just a prisoner. She was someone who had been treated with care. By the enemy. The same enemy who had destroyed her people, taken her captive, and brought her here. It didn't make sense. Nothing about this situation made sense. But for the first time since her capture, Zira allowed herself to feel something other than fear. She felt safe. And that feeling, so new and strange, terrified her. A strange peace. Days passed, and Zira couldn't shake the strange feeling that had settled inside her. She had been a warrior her whole life. She was raised to fight, to survive, to never show weakness. But here, in this place, with Marcus, the human soldier, she felt something she had never expected to feel. A strange peace. It wasn't the kind of peace she knew. It wasn't the peace of a battlefield after the fighting stopped, when all that was left was silence and death. No, this was different. It was a calmness, a quiet that wrapped around her like a soft blanket, and it terrified her. She spent her days in the small room, pacing and thinking. Marcus never tried to rush her. He brought her food, fresh clothes, and books, just like before. He asked her how she was, but never forced her to talk. Sometimes he would sit with her in silence, as if he understood that words weren't always needed. Zira had been taught that humans were ruthless. They killed without mercy, destroyed anything in their path. But Marcus, he was different. He treated her with respect, with kindness, and that kindness made her question everything she had believed. One evening, Marcus entered the room with his usual calm smile. Zira had grown used to his presence, but today there was something different in his eyes. It wasn't just care or concern. It was something deeper, something she couldn't quite place. "Zira," he said softly, as he placed a tray of food on the small table. "I've been thinking. I want to ask you something." Zira looked up from where she had been sitting on the bed. "What is it?" she asked cautiously, unsure of what to expect. Marcus hesitated for a moment, as if choosing his words carefully. "I want to know more about your people, your planet. What's it like?" Zira stiffened. It was a simple question, but it felt like a trap. Humans had always wanted to know more about her people, to exploit their weaknesses, to learn their secrets. She had been trained to guard that information with her life. She wasn't sure if she could trust Marcus with the truth. "I'm not sure I can tell you anything," Zira replied, her voice guarded. "My people, they are not something you should want to know about." Marcus nodded, his expression thoughtful. "I understand. I don't want to force you to talk about something you're not ready to share, but if you ever want to, I'm here. You can trust me." Zira stared at him, her mind a whirlwind of confusion. Could she trust him? After everything that had happened, was it even possible to trust a human? And yet, As she looked into his eyes, she felt the truth in his words. He wasn't trying to deceive her. He was offering her something she had never experienced before. Understanding. The silence between them grew, but this time, it didn't feel uncomfortable. It felt peaceful. For the first time, Xira wasn't planning her escape or waiting for something terrible to happen. She was just sitting, listening to the quiet. That night, Xira lay on the bed, her mind restless. She couldn't stop thinking about Marcus and the strange peace he had brought into her life. Every part of her wanted to push it away, to remain the cold, detached warrior she had always been. But it was harder than she expected. She had been prepared for war, for suffering, for anger. But what she wasn't prepared for was peace. And peace, it seemed, was harder to fight than any battle she had ever faced. Over the next few days, Marcus continued his routine. He checked on her, brought her meals, and always asked how she was. He didn't try to push her, didn't demand anything from her. He just gave her space, allowed her time to think. It was the most unusual thing she had ever experienced. One morning, Marcus entered with a new book. It was a history of human culture, filled with stories of their past wars, their revolutions, and their peace. He handed it to her with a smile. "I thought you might find it interesting," he said, his voice soft. "I know you've been here a while, and I want you to feel at home. If you ever want to talk, I'll be here." Xira took the book, unsure of what to say. The gesture seemed so simple, yet it meant more than any weapon or threat she had ever known. She wasn't sure what to do with it, but she accepted it. For the first time in weeks, she felt something close to comfort. Later that day, as she sat on the bed, Xira opened the book. She read about human struggles, about their wars and their victories. She read about the times when they fought each other, and then about the times when they came together to create peace. The stories were powerful, but what struck her the most was the way they spoke of kindness, of cooperation, of understanding. She closed the book and sat in silence. The peace Marcus had given her was not just in the food, the comfort, or the kindness. It was in the understanding. He had treated her as a person, not a prisoner. He had shown her that there was more to humanity than what she had been taught. Xira didn't know what the future held or how long she would stay in this strange place. But for the first time, she wasn't afraid. The fear that had once consumed her had slowly begun to fade, replaced by something new. A strange peace. Unexpected pleasures. Xira had always thought she understood her emotions. As a warrior, she had been trained to control them, to keep them locked away, so they wouldn't interfere with her mission. But now, in this strange new world, those emotions were becoming harder to control. Every time Marcus spoke to her, every time he brought her food or offered her kindness, she felt something inside her that she had never felt before. It wasn't fear, anger, or hatred. It was something new, something she couldn't explain. At first, Xira tried to push these feelings away. She told herself that they were nothing more than weakness. A prisoner should never feel grateful. She reminded herself, a prisoner should never trust their captor. And yet, with every passing day, she found herself looking forward to Marcus's visits. She looked forward to hearing his voice, to seeing his calm smile, to feeling the warmth of his presence. It wasn't just his kindness that confused her. There was something else, something more personal. Every time he came into the room, Xira couldn't help but notice how handsome he was. His strong jaw, the way his muscles moved under his uniform, the way he carried himself with quiet confidence, it all made her heart beat a little faster. It made her feel something she didn't want to feel, not towards a human, and certainly not towards her captor. One evening, Marcus entered with his usual calm demeanor, but today there was a difference in his eyes. Xira couldn't quite place it, but something about him seemed softer, more approachable. It was as if he was seeing her differently, or maybe she was seeing him differently. "Xira," he said, his voice low and gentle, "I brought you something special tonight." Xira looked up, startled. She had grown used to the simple meals he had brought, But this time, there was something more in his hands. He held a small box, wrapped in soft cloth, and placed it on the table in front of her. "I thought you might like a change," he said, his tone warm. "Something to make you feel more at ease." Zira frowned, confused. "What is it?" she asked, her voice wary. Marcus smiled and opened the box. Inside, Zira saw a small, delicate perfume bottle. The liquid inside shimmered in the dim light, a soft golden hue. The scent that rose from the bottle was sweet and calming, a mix of flowers and something more subtle, like fresh rain. Zira had never smelled anything like it before. "I thought it might remind you of home," Marcus said softly. "It's a scent that some of my people wear. I hope you like it." Zira didn't know what to say. She had never received such a gift, not from an enemy, and certainly not from a human. She hesitated, but Marcus seemed to be waiting for her response. "Thank you," she said quietly, though she didn't fully understand why he had given it to her. "It's very kind of you." Marcus nodded and stepped back, his eyes lingering on her face for a moment. "I'm glad you like it. You deserve to feel comfortable here, Zira. You don't have to stay locked away in fear. You're not alone." Zira's heart skipped a beat at his words. There was so much honesty in his voice, so much care. It was unlike anything she had ever experienced. It made her feel warm, and yet it also made her feel vulnerable. Her training told her to stay strong, to stay distant, but something in Marcus's kindness made it harder and harder to follow those rules. Later that evening, Zira sat on the bed, the small bottle of perfume in her hands. She didn't know why she was holding it so carefully, as if it was something precious. Maybe it was because it was the first time someone had shown her this kind of attention, this kind of care, since she had been taken prisoner. Maybe it was because Marcus was treating her like a person, not just an enemy. As she carefully opened the bottle and let the scent fill the air, she felt a strange, unexpected pleasure. The fragrance was soothing, and as it settled around her, it seemed to calm the tension in her body. She had been so wound up, so focused on survival, that she hadn't realized how much she needed this kind of peace, this small moment of calm. She closed her eyes and breathed deeply, the soft scent taking away some of the stress that had built up inside her. When Marcus came back the next day, he noticed the perfume bottle on the table. He smiled. "I'm glad you liked it," he said, his voice gentle. "It looks good on you." Zira's heart skipped a beat again. She didn't know why she was feeling this way. She was a soldier, a fighter. She wasn't supposed to feel this. Soft. But when Marcus spoke to her like that, when he treated her with kindness and respect, it made her feel alive in a way she hadn't known in a long time. "You really are different from the others," Zira said, her voice barely above a whisper. It was a simple statement, but it held so much truth. The other humans she had encountered had been cruel, cold. But Marcus was warm, patient. He didn't want to harm her. He wanted to help her. Marcus's smile softened. "I'm not like them, Zira. I don't believe in violence. I believe in giving people a chance." Zira felt something stir inside her. It wasn't just gratitude or respect. It was something more, something deeper. She couldn't explain it, but she felt it every time Marcus was near. And though it frightened her, she couldn't deny it. She was starting to care for him. And that, she realized, was something she hadn't expected. The pleasure she felt from his kindness, his touch, was the most unexpected thing of all. Doubts and confusion. Zira's mind was in turmoil. The calm, peaceful days she had spent with Marcus were starting to feel like a dream she wasn't sure was real anymore. She had come to this place expecting to be treated like a prisoner, expecting cruelty and pain. Instead, she had been treated with kindness, patience, and even care. But what did it all mean? The scent of the perfume still lingered in the air, reminding her of the soft moments she had shared with Marcus. But each time she thought about it, doubts crept into her mind. Was this just another trick? Was he pretending to be kind, only to use her in some way she couldn't yet understand? Or was it possible that Marcus truly cared for her? Zira spent hours pacing the small room, her thoughts racing. Every time she looked at Marcus, she felt a strange pull inside her, a feeling she couldn't explain. She had been taught to trust no one. She had been trained to fight, to survive, to never let her guard down. But Marcus made it so difficult. His kindness seemed so genuine, his words so full of warmth. It made her question everything she had known about humans. But what if she was wrong? What if his kindness was just a way to weaken her, to make her more compliant? What if he was setting her up for something worse? The questions haunted her every moment, and she couldn't find any answers. That evening, Marcus entered the room with his usual calm smile, but today, Sarah didn't feel the same warmth she once did. The doubts were too strong. She watched him carefully, trying to gauge his intentions. His eyes met hers, and for a moment, the world seemed to stop. Was he pretending, or was this real? Was this peace between them just a fragile illusion? "Tara," Marcus said softly, sitting down across from her. "How are you feeling today?" She didn't answer right away. Instead, she studied him, her gaze sharp and focused. The way he looked at her, the way he spoke, was it all just an act? Was she falling into a trap? "I'm fine," Zira replied at last, her voice tight. She couldn't bring herself to say more. The words felt wrong. She didn't want to show weakness, not to him, not to anyone, not after everything she had been through. Marcus didn't seem to notice the coldness in her tone. He smiled, a gentle, understanding smile that made Zira's heart race. "I'm glad to hear that. If you ever want to talk, you know where to find me." Zira felt a strange flutter in her chest. She didn't want to admit it, but his words made her feel something. Something more than confusion, more than doubt. It was a feeling she didn't want to acknowledge. But it was there, growing stronger with every passing day. "I don't know if I can trust you," Zira said suddenly, her voice low but firm. The words were out before she could stop them, and as soon as she said them, she regretted it. Marcus blinked in surprise, his smile fading slightly. "What do you mean?" "I mean," she continued, her voice trembling despite her effort to stay strong, "I don't know if I can trust anyone anymore. You say you want to help me, but I don't understand why. You're human. You're supposed to be my enemy. So why are you treating me like this?" Marcus's expression softened, and he leaned forward slightly. "Zira, I don't want to hurt you. I don't want to use you. I know what you've been through, and I can't change that. But I do want you to know that I care about you, and I want to help you, however I can." Zira shook her head, unable to believe his words. "I don't know if I can believe you." The silence between them stretched out, heavy and thick. Zira's mind was spinning with doubt. She wanted to believe him. She wanted to believe that he was different, that he wasn't like the others. But every part of her screamed to stay guarded, to stay strong. She couldn't afford to trust anyone, not after everything that had happened to her. "Zira," Marcus said gently, breaking the silence. "I know this is hard, and I understand if you're scared. I can't erase what's happened, but I can promise you that I will never hurt you. I'll never force you to do anything you don't want to do. All I ask is that you give me a chance to show you that not all humans are the same." Zira's heart wavered. She wanted to scream, to push him away, to tell him that she wasn't some helpless creature who needed saving. But at the same time, she couldn't help the strange feeling that was growing inside her, a feeling of warmth, of hope. It was terrifying, but it was also comforting. "I'm not ready," Zira said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I can't trust you yet. I need time." Marcus nodded, his eyes filled with understanding. "Take all the time you need, Zira. I'll be here, whenever you're ready." Zira turned away from him, unable to look at him any longer. Her emotions were a tangled mess, and she didn't know how to untangle them. She wanted to trust him, but her doubts were too strong. She didn't know what to believe anymore. And the worst part was, she wasn't sure if she ever would. As Marcus left the room, Sarah sat in the silence, her thoughts swirling. The doubts wouldn't go away, but neither would the strange warmth that had started to bloom in her chest. It was confusing, frightening, and painful, but in some small part of her, Sarah couldn't help but wish she could trust him. A moment of truth. The days were getting harder for Sarah. Every moment she spent with Marcus only deepened the confusion inside her. One minute, she felt an intense pull toward him, something she could barely control. The next, she doubted everything. She wanted to trust him, but her training told her to remain distant, to keep her guard up. She couldn't let herself forget who he was. A human, her captor. Yet there were moments when it felt like everything she had been taught didn't matter. There were moments when Marcus was near, and she felt safe. She hadn't felt safe in so long. She wasn't sure what to do with that feeling. Was it real? Or was she just falling into a trap, like so many others before her? That day, Marcus came into her room with the same calm, steady expression he always wore. But today, Sarah noticed something different. There was a tension in his posture, something tight in his shoulders that wasn't usually there. It made her nervous, though she didn't know why. "Sarah," he said, his voice a little more serious than usual. "I need to talk to you about something." Sarah's heart skipped a beat. She had been expecting a casual conversation, but the way he spoke made her feel uneasy. She looked up at him, waiting for him to continue. "Okay," she replied, her voice low. Marcus took a deep breath and sat down across from her. His eyes never left hers, his expression serious. For a moment, Sarah was too nervous to say anything. His presence, usually so calming, now made her feel like there was something heavy in the air. "I know this is hard for you," Marcus began, "and I don't want to push you. But I also don't want you to be trapped by your doubts forever." He paused, searching her face for any sign of her thoughts. "You've been quiet lately. I can see that you're struggling with something, and I want you to know that you can talk to me about it. Whatever it is, I'll listen." Sarah felt her chest tighten. She didn't know what to say. She had spent so much time hiding her emotions, pretending everything was fine. But the truth was, nothing felt fine. She felt torn between two worlds. The world of her past, where she was a warrior and a prisoner, and the world Marcus was offering her, one of peace, kindness, and trust. "I don't know what to think anymore," she said, her voice cracking slightly. She didn't mean to sound weak, but the words came out anyway. "You've been kind to me. Too kind. And I keep wondering why. Why would you help me? Why would you care about someone like me?" Marcus's expression softened. He reached out slowly, his hand hovering near hers, almost as if he was afraid of scaring her. "I care because you deserve it," he said quietly. "You're not just some prisoner. You're a person, and I believe that every person, no matter who they are or where they come from, deserves kindness and respect." Sarah's breath caught in her throat. She had heard those words before, but never in a way that made her believe them. There was something about the sincerity in his voice, the gentleness in his eyes, that made her question everything. For a moment, she wanted to believe him. She wanted to trust him so badly it almost hurt. But doubt crept back in. She couldn't let herself forget the fear and pain she had experienced before. "I don't know if I can trust you," she whispered. "I want to. But it's hard. I've been hurt too many times before. I don't know if I can let myself fall into something I can't control." Marcus was quiet for a long moment, his eyes never leaving hers. Then he spoke again, his voice steady, but filled with something deeper, something Sarah couldn't quite name. "I understand," he said softly. "Trust is something that takes time. But I want you to know that I'm not like the others. I'm not going to hurt you, Sarah. I don't want to see you suffer anymore. I just want to help you, in any way I can." Sarah felt her heart race. His words were so simple, but they carried such weight. It was the first time she had heard anyone speak to her like that, without hidden motives or cruelty. It made her feel safe. It made her feel something she wasn't ready for. "I don't know if I can be who you want me to be," Zira said, her voice barely a whisper. "I've been through so much. I'm not sure if I can trust anyone again, even if they are kind to me." Marcus nodded slowly, understanding in his eyes. "You don't have to change who you are. You don't have to trust me right away. I just want you to know that I'm here for you, whenever you're ready. And if you never want to trust me, I'll respect that too. But I want you to know that I'm not like anyone you've known before." Zira felt a lump form in her throat. She wanted to say more, but the words wouldn't come. She wanted to trust him, to let him in, but something held her back. She felt like she was standing on the edge of something big, something life-changing. But the fear was still there, deep down inside her, whispering that she couldn't let herself fall. "I need time," Zira said quietly, her voice trembling with emotion. "I don't know if I can trust you yet, but I don't want to hurt you either. I need time to think." Marcus smiled, a soft, understanding smile. "Take all the time you need, Zira. I'm not going anywhere." Zira nodded, feeling a strange mixture of relief and fear. She didn't know what the future held, or if she would ever be able to fully trust Marcus. But for the first time in a long while, she felt like there might be a chance for something good, something real. As Marcus left the room, Zira sat in silence, her mind racing. She had no answers, no clear path forward. But something had shifted. For the first time, she wasn't so sure that her doubts were all that mattered. The choice. Zira stood by the window, looking out at the unfamiliar world beyond. The stars glittered brightly in the distance, and the soft hum of the ship's engines filled the air. It had been weeks since she had been taken aboard Marcus's ship, weeks of confusion, doubt, and unexpected kindness. She still couldn't understand it all. She had been trained to fight, to distrust, and to survive. But Marcus, he was different. She couldn't ignore the way he made her feel. Every time he spoke to her, every time he touched her hand or looked at her with those soft eyes, she felt something stir inside her. Something she didn't want to feel. Something she had been too afraid to face. But today, something was different. She had reached the end of the road. No more running, no more hiding. She had to make a choice. She could either stay behind the walls of her doubt and fear, or she could trust him. Her heart raced as she thought about it. She could stay with Marcus and finally let herself believe in the kindness he had shown her, or she could walk away, knowing she might never have this chance again. She had always lived by the rules of her people. Never trust, never show weakness. But in the silence of her thoughts, she realized that her rules had only brought her pain. It was time to stop running. Time to face what her heart had been telling her all along. Marcus had told her that he wasn't like the others, that he wouldn't hurt her. But could she trust him? Could she really let go of the fear that had defined her entire life? She looked down at the small pendant around her neck, a gift from her people, a symbol of the warrior she used to be. It felt heavy now, a reminder of everything she had left behind. Zira turned away from the window and walked toward the door. She had made up her mind. She would go to him. As she stepped into the corridor, her heart beat faster. She felt like she was walking into the unknown, but for the first time in a long time, she didn't feel afraid. She was scared, yes, but that fear was no longer controlling her. It was just a feeling, a small part of her that she could ignore. She had made her decision. She found Marcus in the main room, sitting at a table, his hands folded in front of him. When he saw her, he stood up immediately, his eyes filled with concern. "Zira," he said softly, "are you okay?" Zira took a deep breath, gathering her courage. "I'm not sure, but I know what I want." Marcus's expression softened. "What do you want?" Zira stepped closer, her heart racing in her chest. "I want to trust you," she said, her voice steady but quiet. "I don't know if I can ever be the person you want me to be, but I can try. I want to be with you, Marcus, I want to see where this can go. Marcus didn't say anything for a moment. His eyes searched her face, as if trying to understand if she was really saying what he thought she was saying. Then, slowly, a smile spread across his face, gentle and full of warmth. "I've waited for you to say that," he said, his voice filled with relief. "But you didn't have to say it all at once. I've never asked you to change, Hadera. I only wanted you to know that I care for you, and if you can trust me, even just a little bit, that's enough for me." Zira felt her chest tighten, her emotions swirling inside her. She hadn't expected him to say that. She had thought he would try to convince her more, but instead, he was giving her the space to make her own choice. "Do you really think I can change?" she asked softly. "I don't know if change is the right word," Marcus replied. "You don't need to change. I just want you to be yourself. You've been through so much already, Sarah. I don't want to make things harder for you. But if you're willing to try, I'll be right here, every step of the way." Zira's heart swelled with emotion. It was hard to put into words what she was feeling. She had always thought she would have to fight for everything in her life, that nothing would ever come easy. But standing here, with Marcus looking at her like she was the only thing that mattered, she felt something she hadn't felt in so long. She felt hope. "I'm scared," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "I don't know if I can do this. I don't know if I can trust you, or anyone, ever again." Marcus stepped closer, his hand gently brushing hers. "You don't have to trust me all at once. You don't have to do anything you're not ready for. But I'll be here, Sarah. I'll be here, no matter what. And if you decide you want to take a chance on me, I'll be waiting." Zira looked into his eyes, and for the first time in a long time, she didn't feel the need to protect herself. She felt seen. She felt heard. And most of all, she felt like she wasn't alone anymore. With a deep breath, Zira made her choice. "I want to try," she said, her voice steady. "I want to try with you." A smile spread across Marcus's face, and in that moment, Zira knew she had made the right choice. There was still a long road ahead, full of challenges and uncertainty, but for the first time, she didn't have to walk it alone. Marcus reached out and took her hand, holding it gently. "Then let's take this one step at a time." Zira nodded, feeling a weight lift off her shoulders. The future was unknown, but she was no longer afraid of it. She had made her choice, and that was all she needed. Together, they would face whatever came next.